Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran, filing litigation against Napster 20 years too late, or else a scrappy upstart, filing litigation against Spotify 20 years too early, this is your show because ultimately it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's the first Friday of December 2022, and I thank you for joining us. This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay somebody called a web developer to get a website made, and it would always be some guy named Manny who drove an Isuzu Trooper with Incubus mud flaps, and who was always trying to enmesh you in his multi-level marketing scheme involving timeshares in Galveston. And old Manny would charge you about $1,000 for a website that would be obsolete in 6 months. But it's the future now, you guys. That's not how it works anymore. We're allowed to have nice things now. One of those nice things is Bandzoogle. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. All the features you need for a professional website are already built in. Hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, tools to sell your music and merch commission-free, and they've just added custom landing pages. You can now easily create your own music landing pages using preset page templates and built-in funnel tools. The Working Songwriter podcast listeners can go to bandzoogle.com to try it for free for 30 days. Use the promo code TWS, the initials of our show, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. If you'd like to hear some of my music live in the coming weeks, you can check out my tour page, joepugmusic.com/tour, where there are a bevy of new tour dates posted all around the world, from London to Wolf Trap. Or you can find me the first Sunday night of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern over on YouTube for Sunday Songs. That's a live stream. I'm live. I'm playing tunes live. I'm taking questions in the live chat. It's a really fun, really interactive experience. I dare to say that we're building something of a community over there, including many people who are listeners to this podcast. So come on over and be a part of it. It's the first Sunday night of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern. Head on over to joepugmusic.com and click on the live stream tab to set a reminder. Finally, if you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a couple of things that you could do to help. First, you could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you find meaningful. You just head to their site, Patreon, or you search for The Working Songwriter on there or my name, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for the show. Think of it as a voluntary subscription, a subscription that you certainly don't have to pay for, but that you choose to pay for because you dig the show and because you won't miss a few bucks at the end of the month. If just 1% of our listenership would kick in the price of a cup of coffee every month, it would make an immense difference. So thank you to everybody who's taken the time and the capital to support the show in that way. If you're not in a place where you can contribute in that way, I totally get it. You could still help us out in a couple of ways for free. First, you could leave us a rating in the iTunes store, or second, you could simply tell a friend about the show. Spread the word about the show. The simple math on those two things is that they will help me much more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. Okay, I'll end all the harassment there. Obviously, it was an honor to interview John Oates for this show, and I really hope that you dig our conversation. This week, we welcome one of our most accomplished guests, who, both as a member of the iconic duo Darryl Hall and John Oates, as well as a solo artist, has released chart-topping music for decades. John Oates is a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the American Songwriters Hall of Fame. He's a recipient of the prestigious BMI Icon Award, as well as numerous American Music and MTV Awards and multiple Grammy nominations. Since forming his creative partnership with Darryl Hall in the early 1970s, they have gone on to record 21 albums, which have sold over 80 million units, making them the most successful duo in rock history. They have scored 10 number one records, over 20 top 40 hits, and have toured the world for decades. I got a chance to catch up with John on the phone a few weeks ago to hear about his 50-year odyssey in music. John Oates of the iconic duo Darryl Hall and John Oates, thanks so much for being a part of the Working Songwriter podcast. I really want to talk to you about this new single that you have out right now, Pushing a Rock, both about the single itself and also the cause behind it. But for our listeners, I'd really like to start significantly earlier in your arc. You got your start in Philadelphia. And what's really interesting to me is you guys started in Philadelphia, two guys out of Philly, and you end up signed to Atlantic Records. How did you guys get out of the club scene and the ballroom scene there in Philly and onto the national stage?
Well, we were never really part of any sort of club scene or ballroom scene in Philadelphia. We were studio musicians and hippies and songwriters and performers. We never really played. I mean, Darryl played in a bar band for a while. I never really played in a bar band. I played in some blues bands, things like that. I did a lot of folk and blues in coffee houses and things like that. So basically, we started as as songwriters and doing some studio work, and then eventually we were able, through our publisher, Chapel Music at the time, which was based in New York. We met, it's a long, involved story. We had to go to California, LA, and we met this guy named Earl McGrath, who was associated with Ahmet Ertegun and Atlantic Records, and he liked us and told us to go back to New York and audition for them. And eventually we auditioned for Arif Mardin, the producer, and Arif wanted to produce us, and that was the clincher. That's what got us the contract with Atlantic.
Because the producer himself heard something, and you think he heard something based on kind of your studio chops, since you guys had been playing in the studio so much?
I mean, as usual, most producers, they're always oriented towards songs. He heard our songs, and evidently he heard something there, and he thought we were unique. And it has so much to do with so many things. The synergy between the producer's musical aesthetic and the artist, the timing. Maybe if he had a whole bunch of projects stacked up, maybe he wouldn't have been interested in us because he wouldn't have had the time. There's a million variables that you really can't. Every once in a while, the world kind of comes into sync with you, and things go well. But it was a fortuitous moment for us to be handled by him and be be produced by him for our first two albums, because he was one of the great producers of all time, and he set the standard, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of how to run a session. And to this day in Nashville and wherever I record, I basically run the sessions similar to the way he did our sessions back in the early 70s.
Okay, so it sounds like you basically went to graduate school there with him.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what, on a very granular level, what are the lessons that you're learning from a master like that to run a session? Like, what were some of the things that you came in lacking at first that you really needed to learn and drill down on?
Well, I mean, we do have to remember, Darryl and I were quite familiar with being in a recording studio because we had done work in Philadelphia. So it wasn't that it was our first time. We weren't babes in the woods, but we were definitely not very experienced. This was our first recording experience in New York City, and to really break it down, what he did was he allowed us to be ourselves and experiment and and stretch out to a point. But he always, at some point during our work together, it was, it was said a little bit in jest, but it was actually very serious. He would say now, and he was Turkish, but so he had this heavy accent. He would say, and now I put on my producer's cap, which meant it was time to listen to him and stop fucking around. So basically, but above and beyond all that, what he did was he heard our songs and he heard them from a pure musical point of view. He wasn't interested or hung up on styles or fads or what was on the radio at the moment. All he wanted to do was take the songs that we had written, the raw material, and surround them with the best musical accompaniment. And that meant the best studio musicians, the best players he could find, who was the exact right drummer, the exact right bass player, exact right guitarist or percussionist or whatever, to enhance that song at the moment. And then, of course, his amazing string arrangements, which he was an absolute master at. So it was really, and then allowing these great musicians to play and allowing them to do what they do because he had chosen them specifically for their skill set. And I think it's a very, very important thing to recognize. And here again, I go back to saying, and this is exactly how I like to run my recording sessions. I know the musicians in Nashville now intimately, and there's so much incredible resource in terms of players, but it's who you pick, who you choose. Vince Gill said to me a while back, he said, when you're doing a session in Nashville and you're producing, he said, you almost think of yourself as a movie director. Who's the right actor, or in this case, player, for this particular moment, for this song. There's a million great guitar players, a million great everybody in Nashville. But who's going to deliver that exact sound and that sensibility to the music that you want to make at that moment? And that's what I learned from Arif Mardin.
So it sounds like in some ways, if from your perspective, if you've done your job right, kind of casting the band, yes. There's not going to be too much work left for you to do once the session starts.
No, you just monitor the situation and you make sure that it's going in the direction that you want. I very rarely jump in and impose my will or suggestions unless it's just not, I just know that something needs to be changed. But for the most part, when you pick the right players and you give them some direction. And the other thing I do, I've always done, and I do a lot now as well, is I make very extensive GarageBand demos of the songs that I want to record. And I do them at home because, you can describe music, until you're blue in the face. But when you actually play something for someone, they immediately understand what it is you're trying to do. And so, I even use some of my home GarageBand tracks, in as part of the live recording when necessary. But the main focus of that is to walk into the room, say, here, guys, here's what we want to do today, and play them the raw home demos, which gives them a starting point. And now we're not starting from zero. We're already up, we're starting from 60% of they understand what it is that I was going for.
What are some techniques that you use if you end up in a situation where you realize, maybe I miscast this one particular player for this session? What do you have to do at that point to rejigger and get things back on course?
There's only one thing that matters: the drums.
Okay, fair enough.
If the groove is right, I can do anything I want. If when you're in the digital world and Pro Tools, et cetera, if the groove is right, you can replace the bass, the guitars, you name it. You can do whatever you want. But it rarely happens. And really, when you have players who are as skilled and versatile as the ones that I like to use, just a simple suggestion or a simple, comment from the engineer about the tone or the sound, or, hey, let's try this amp, or, we need a little bit more gritty bass sound. It's too clean. Why don't you try this? Hey, don't play the fretless, play the Fender, the drummer I use comes in with 20 snare drums. The guitar player comes in with an incredible pedal board and a selection of amplifiers. I mean, so that really the palette is so wide. It's just a matter of making the right choices.
Compared to those early years getting started in Philadelphia before your first deal and now working in modern Nashville, how do you think how has your songwriting style changed the most? Or let me rephrase that. I'm not talking about songwriting style. I'm talking more about technique. Like your technique from songwriting from when you began to now. What do you think has changed the most?
Well, I think the essential part has never really changed. It's picking up an instrument. For me, it's mostly guitar. Sometimes it's a keyboard, um, and really, having an initial inspiration. Now, that might be a set of words, it might be a melody, it might be a groove, it might be a chord progression. It can be anything, really. I think the best answer for that is the rule is no rules. You take it where you can get it, and then I think what's changed for me, in the old days, back way back when, that's all we had. We had the instruments and the vocals, and then you had to make everything happen in the studio. Now, as I said earlier, I'm very I have I'm well. I'm really good at GarageBand, which a lot of people, kind of poke fun at me for using such a simple, platform. But the honest truth is I'm so quick on it that when I have an idea and I do pick up a guitar and I say, oh, I can have a track within literally minutes. And even though that might not be the final thing, it might change or morph or whatever. At least it gets me going, and I don't get bogged down in technology, because I'm quick and very proficient at it.
Well, yeah, and I'm a big fan of Logic and too. And the way I look at it, it's like, well, make fun of it all you want, guys, if you think it's basic. But this is more technology than I think the Beatles had when they were making
Oh,
records.
yeah,
So
by about 1,000
yeah,
times.
so what's really interesting to me is you have seen success over such a long period of time and in so many different forms in the entertainment business. It's pretty much impossible to attain any amount of success in entertainment, but then to do it over time, to iterate over and over and over again, that's nearly impossible. It almost never happens. Why do you think you have been able to? What have been some of the most essential characteristics of your artistic or personal life that have allowed you to find success in so many different forms and iterations? What is the common thread through there that has helped you make a life in the creative arts?
Well, I think, I kind of assume that when you say you mean the plural you. You're talking about Hall and Oates. And that's fine if you are. Well, the fact that there's two people, two creative entities, two creative brains and souls and points of view, combined with some other outside writers who have contributed over the years. Um, and I think that both Darryl and I are able to take concepts and ideas that are universal, but make them feel very personal and make and kind of put them over as though they're not really universal ideas, but they're more interpersonal, connection between people. And I think that's what makes people relate to our songs. They relate to them in their own unique way. They ascribe whatever it is that their emotions or their what they get out of the music. But at the same time, that may not, obviously, and many times, is not exactly what Darryl and I may have intended.
Hmm.
And I think that's some kind of skill that you really can't bottle that. I don't know what that is. It just is. Um, and I think that's why our songs have endured, and that's why they still communicate and they still resonate with a younger generation, because they're timeless. They don't have a timestamp on them.
It's interesting that link between the specific and the universal. You're saying it's something that basically can't be learned. I pretty much agree with you. But have there been times in your creative life when you've thought to yourself, "Well, I don't know quite what's going wrong here, but I'm not hitting that mark right now I'm not hitting that universal mark anymore with my songs." Can you remember a time when you had to kind of change your course to get back on to that wavelength?
I don't think I've had to change my course to get back wavelength. I just had to, you can't hit a home run every time at bat.
Right.
You're going to hit a couple stinkers, along the way. Luckily for us, we were both prolific enough to not worry about the stinkers. We just got to get rid of them and bury them. So what you hear on the records is the best of the moment, the best of the time, the best of what we had at that moment. So and one thing I will say, and this is something that if I have any kind of beef about the way Hall & Oates has been perceived over the years, is that our hits are so ubiquitous, and they've such outweighed our album tracks and our catalog, that unfortunately some really, really great music that we made on our albums has been completely overlooked over the years. And not, hey, it's a great problem to have a lot of hits, and believe me, I'm very appreciative of it, and I don't discount it at all. But I will say that that we've made a lot of really good music, and I also will say that we've never put a song on an album that we thought was filler or that was just taking up space. Every song, and in addition to that, I know I'm probably long-winded here, but in addition to that, we've treated every song on the album with the same amount of time and care and attention that we did with the hits, because we didn't know that the hits were hits. We just thought they were another song. So there wasn't any song we say, oh, well, we're going to spend, we're really, this is Maneater. So boy, I know this is going to be a big #1 record. So, we're really going to dig into this and spend hours and days and scrutiny on this. But, those other 10 songs now, well, yeah, we'll just cut them and put them out. No, we never did that, ever.
Where do you think it came from in your own personal character to deal with it in that way? Because it would actually be very understandable to say, all right, well, we're going to work really hard on this one tune that we think will be a big deal, and then not exactly phone in the other stuff, but we can, hey man, we've had some hits, we got some money, we'll take it easy. Like, what part of your character led you to be that detail oriented, like well into your career?
I'm still the same way. I'm just driven. I'm driven to make. I was born to be a musician from the time I was a young child. I began singing and playing at 5, 6 years old. I've been on stage, since then. It's who I am. It's my life. I can't separate the two. So since it is my life, I want to live my best life possible. So I just feel like I want to, I can always write a better song. I can always play a little bit better. Maybe that's not true. I don't know, but that's the way I think.
What was it like for your family to watch you go into entertainment and music? I mean, it's always, entertainment is always a strange and risky career choice. Were your folks and family supportive?
Very much so. My mother was a bit of a stage mother. I think she lived vicariously through me.
Right.
And she really loved it. It was a source of pride for her. And she in particular, my father, of course, to him too, but my father was working like a dog just to keep things going. But my mother would take me to my lessons. They always would provide me with a guitar or an amp, or if I needed something, there was always there. It was just it was a thing. They recognized I had this musical talent from a very, very early age, and they just helped me and nurtured it.
That's a beautiful thing. I can see a through line from there to those early first sessions when you were attending, quote unquote, your master class there. It sounds like, you ever seen an athlete get put in a situation where they get put on a bad team, the team doesn't look after them, then they end up not having a great career. Then you have the athlete, the quarterback that gets drafted by the right team, and there's a development system around them. And they were talented to begin with, but then that development really allows them to flourish and everything manifest in life. And that's kind of what I'm hearing from your story here all along the way.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I'm a sports guy too, and I understand exactly what you're saying. And you don't do it alone. You never do it alone. There's always a team. There's a team when it comes to music. There's a team when it comes to business. And they always don't necessarily mesh. And sometimes you have to overcome a lot on the business side of things to make sure that the music doesn't get thwarted or perverted in the course of being in a part of a very big and complicated business structure. So you have to balance that, and at the same time you have to surround yourself. You have to have a great band. You have to have great musical soulmates who can help you articulate your vision, especially as a songwriter. And here again, that carries over to collaboration. Collaboration, is an interesting dynamic between people, and that's a whole story unto itself. How obviously Darryl and I, had a very fruitful and good collaboration over the years, and I've collaborated with many people after that, who it's always interesting how it shakes out. You never know. You walk into a room, especially in Nashville when I first got here, you walk into a room with virtual stranger or strangers, and you don't know really what is going to happen. You don't know what they bring to the table. You don't know what they expect you to bring to the table. You don't know what they expect of you. Do they expect you to validate their ideas and help them see it through or articulate it, or do they count on you to bring them something that they can latch onto? There's this it's very unique and very subtle, magical thing that happens when you collaborate with someone. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Are you stuck in a rut? Are you tired of listening to that Jimmy Buffett 20th Century Masters CD over and over again and need some new music? Are you sick of making hamburger helper beef stroganoff for dinner every night and you want something new to cook? What you are looking for, my friends, is the Enthusiast Digest. That's my monthly newsletter, which arrives in your inbox the first Sunday morning of every month, bursting with musical recommendations, poetry selections, recipes and cooking techniques for my favorite dishes, and items of general interest culled from the vast cesspool that is the internet. The Enthusiast Digest is free to subscribe to. If you dig the poetry that you hear on this show and the artists that you're hearing from, you'll dig the newsletter because I approach it with the exact same sensibility of curation. Go to joepugmusic.com/newsletter today to sign up for free. That is joepugmusic.com/newsletter. It takes approximately 15 seconds to sign up for a free newsletter that will enrich the first Sunday of your month with a veritable cornucopia of new and delightful recommendations. That's the Enthusiast Digest, the first Sunday of every month. Sign up for free at joepugmusic.com/newsletter. Talking to John, one thing I really admire is his ability to orient himself forward in his career, even after 50 years in the business. Of course, he's happy to talk about the journey that led him to where he is now, but I was struck by his focus on the new music that he's releasing and the projects that he's embarking on next. If you don't have that orientation, if you find yourself looking backwards too much, it can really obscure your present. And there's a wonderful poem, if not melancholy, that speaks to that fixation with the past. It's entitled Nevermind by Denver Butson. Nevermind. That guests no longer come unannounced, or that the photo album contains pictures of much younger people than we remember being. Never mind that swallows etch Sanskrit on the wrinkled sky. It's November, and the present is emptying its wine into our glasses. Never mind that we're not touching now, because our shadows are holding hands in the dark behind our backs. You mentioned briefly there, the importance of keeping the business apparatus at bay sometimes and not letting it take over. Is the music business, it's changed so much since when you first started. Is it easier to navigate now, or is it more difficult to navigate now?
Well, it's easier for me to navigate now because I'm completely independent and autonomous. I don't have a record label. I don't have a manager. I do everything myself, and I make my own decisions about how and where and what I want to do. So yes, life is good in terms of that for me. But to get there, it's been, a struggle with a lot of things, over the years, it's been a struggle. I think, business and art, when they intersect, there's always a conflict of some sort. Over the years, Darryl and I have dealt with things like that, and then now I'm dealing with stuff on my own. To make sure that I can keep doing what I want to do the way I want to do it, and have some, success. I've had to adapt to the new digital world, the paradigm of releasing non-physical product, which I'm doing right now, which is a whole new concept for me, to break away from the traditional music business paradigm of the big record company, the physical product, the sales, the connection with radio, the association with radio. All that's changed now, and now I'm involved with new young people who are part of that change, and all the new music I'm making is really it's being driven with this completely new paradigm.
Talk to me about some of that new music that you're making. Pushing a Rock is your new single, and the song itself is very interesting, but it kind of comes with a cause. You are raising awareness for mental health and suicide prevention, particularly for men's mental health and suicide prevention. Why that cause in particular right now? Like, what in your heart drew you to that cause?
Well, I've always been aware of Movember, and the Men's Health Initiative. Of course, you can see I got the stash back here in a big way, as part of the Movember movement. It was serendipitous that the song and the connection with Movember happened. Just happened. It was not pre-planned. It was not a strategy. But I had the song, and when Movember reached out to me to become their international spokesperson, I thought this song speaks for the movement. It speaks exactly about what they're trying to achieve and the messaging. So it was just a beautiful intersection of things that happened, and so that's how that happened. I've been very aware of how effective and how that the women's health movement, especially breast cancer in particular, how they've really, spread their word and the messaging across the board. It's universal. It's everywhere. And I joke, when you can get a 300-pound NFL lineman to wear pink shoes, in support of women's breast cancer, you're getting your message across somewhere. Right. I think the men's movement has not been as effective, and I don't think it's been as powerful. But yet it's still as critical and still as serious. And men don't like to talk about certain things, and they avoid going to doctors. And there's all the things that we all know that men tend to not want to be too outspoken or expose themselves about. So I think, but I think it's changing. I see it changing for sure with younger performers, younger athletes who are now not so reluctant to talk about mental health, talk about the things that they're dealing with. So that's a very positive thing. And so, me being an older person, person and a successful person, I think that I can maybe shine a light on this from a different perspective and say, hey, people might look at me and say, oh, well, you've had hit records, you've achieved all this in your life, but yeah, what do you do? Why is something like this even a concern? You're above all this or beyond all this. Well, far be it from the truth, because I've still to this day am dealing with a lot of stresses, a lot of things, and I've dealt with things in the past that have really shaped who I am. So I thought maybe my perspective could be just as powerful, or if not more powerful, to speak on this.
So are you saying that you've had experience with mental health services that were good for you, that inspired you to kind of trumpet their effectiveness to people who might be looking at like?
I don't talk about it very much. It's, I don't like to proselytize on anything, to be honest with you. But yeah, back in the day, back in the late 80s, when Darryl and I had this incredible pop success and we were on top of the world, things were not great for me. I was getting divorced. We lost our manager. I didn't know where I was going. I basically had to drop out. I dropped out of the music business for the entire decade of the 90s, pretty much. And I moved to Colorado. I started my life over again. I got remarried, had a kid, built a house, lived a completely different life, and which really set me on a course for the future. So, there's been a lot of things where I've had to deal with it. And there's things that are going on right now, business-wise, that are still unresolved from the past, that I'm working very hard on restructuring and rebalancing.
Yeah, well, I think it's a very important message, especially post-COVID and during COVID. So many young men dying deaths of despair, either suicide or drugs. So many young men, musical brothers that I've known, it tends to run a lot in the music and creative business. Yeah. And I think it's a wonderful thing you're shining a light on.
Yeah, well, the COVID thing was certainly an impetus for me to review and reassess a lot of things, because for the first time, I got to stay home, and in staying home, I got to address things that, it's like that old John Lennon song, the wheel keeps going round and round. When you get off the hamster wheel, all of a sudden things become a little more clear. And so it certainly was very, very positive for me to be able to step back and to check some things out and now address them.
Well, here's to things becoming more and more clear for all of us. Thanks so much for being a part of the Working Songwriter Podcast.
Yeah, that was a great interview, Joe. I appreciate that.
This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS, the initials of our podcast, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. The latest release by John Oates is entitled Pushin' a Rock, available everywhere music is sold or streamed. If before we meet again you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.